Sardinia's Bronze Age architecture gets a lot of attention because it's eye-catching and there's a lot of it. I'm talking, of course, about the thousands of round towers called nuraghi, the hundreds of tombs called the Tomba dei Giganti, or giants' graves in English, and the holy wells known as the Pozzi Sacri. The Bronze Age architecture isn't generally megalithic, but some of the structures do have features that are considered so. Large megaliths were used to build much of the concave facades typical of giants' graves, and they often had menhirs erected in front of them as well. However, in this video, I'm not talking about the Bronze Age. I'm talking about the period that preceded it, the period that came before the building activities of the nuraghic civilization. I'm talking about the Neolithic, and I'll be touching a little on the Copper Age as well. Just as in Malta, France, Portugal, Spain, Ireland, England, and many other places, megalithic structures proliferated in Sardinia during the Neolithic. Necropoli, made up of tombs known as domus de janas in Sardinian, which means fairy houses, were also carved out of the bedrock in huge numbers at that time. These might not be considered megalithic per se, but the effort that went into excavating them, together with their intricate carvings and elaborate, sometimes even strange art, are something to be marveled at. They were definitely created by the same people that built the Menhirs and Dolmens all over the island. So they are important in understanding more about the megalith builders. Most of this video will be about this ancient underworld, some of which I've explored myself, but we'll also talk about the other megalithic structures, much of which have unknown functions. Now, a quick note on naming conventions. In Sardinia, a lot of sites are named in Sardinian as well as Italian. And sometimes when I'm going through texts, I find a muddle of English, Italian, and Sardinian. So to be clear, in this video, when I say necropolis, I mean one underground burial complex, or Hypogea. When I say necropoli, I mean more than one of these. When I talk about the domus de janas, I mean a series of tombs with one entrance leading up to them, within a necropolis. So you can have more than one domus de Janus inside a necropolis. Domus de Janus is the same in both the singular and the plural wherever I look, so we'll just leave it at that. The megalith builders were mostly active throughout the ancient world in the Neolithic period. There were several different types of megalithic architecture, and sometimes the functions of each structure are unknown. Much of it appears to have played a funerary role. The many portal tombs and passage graves in Ireland were almost certainly for primary inhumations. The same can be said for the dolmens all over the ancient world, even if many of these were empty by the time archaeologists excavated them. Although Malta's megalithic legacy is an exception to this, its most abundant megalithic remains are the complex ceremonial buildings cautiously referred to as temples. They appear to have played much more of a role in rituals to the living than to the dead. So what monuments did the Neolithic people of Sardinia build, and what's unusual about them? The early Neolithic in Sardinia began around 6000 BCE when farmers, whose pottery is now referred to as impressed ware, inhabited the island. Archaeological evidence points to them having lived in open-air hut villages and caves. There's nothing megalithic from that period. The ritual practices of these early farmers seem to have taken on new dimensions around the 5th millennium BCE, when the Bonu Iginu culture created corpulent figurines, not dissimilar to those of the later temple people in Malta. These figurines are referred to as mother goddesses, although their role in the Middle Neolithic society of Sardinia isn't clear. Once again, there were no megaliths at this stage. The recent Neolithic was when it got really interesting. This period was defined by the San Siriaco phase, during which the creation of Domus de Janus began. Around this time, the Arzacana culture also appeared, but this was largely confined to Gallura in the northeastern part of Sardinia. Unlike the collective tombs of the Domus de Janus, the Arzacana culture built megalithic stone circles with individual graves in the centre, such as this one at Limura. This was originally covered with an earthen mound as well. The final Neolithic was characterised by the Ozieri culture, who built thousands of Domus de Janus, some of which continue to be used right into the Bronze Age. There are the remains of around 2,500 Domus de Janus in Sardinia. The Ozieri culture lived in both caves and hut villages and continued to carve mother goddess figurines, but these were more stylized than before and certainly less volumetric. As well as domus janas, the Ozieri culture built many above-ground megalithic structures. So at this point, it's useful to quickly look at how this compared to the rest of the central Mediterranean at that time. The Ozieri culture were active from roughly 4,300 to 3,700 BCE. They were contemporary with the cultures of Sancono Piano Notaro in Sicily, Piano Conte in the Aeolian Islands just north of Sicily, Diana in southern Italy, Diana Chassi in central Italy, and Chassi La Gozza in northern Italy. None of these were megalith builders, and none of these locations went on to host megalith building cultures. That's not to say that megaliths or structures that are disputed to be megalithic cannot be found in these places, but they are in small numbers and don't appear to be characteristic of a fully formed, sophisticated megalith building culture. In France, that period was inhabited by the Chassines and Corsica by the Bassines. Neither of these cultures were megalith builders either. However, both locations did go on to have megalith building cultures in subsequent phases. That time in Malta followed the 5th millennium hiatus, a period of around 800 years when it's thought the islands were largely abandoned by early Neolithic farmers, only to be resettled again in the Zabouche phase. The Zabouche phase lasted a couple of hundred years. The people inhabiting the islands during that phase did not start building megaliths until later. So basically, not everywhere in the central Mediterranean developed a megalith building tradition, but those that did, Sardinia, Corsica, and Malta, did so during the late Neolithic and the Copper Age, and these dates vary. Sardinia appears to have had some of the earliest megalithic monuments and sophisticated underground funerary complexes. After the Ozieri culture came the transition into the Copper Age. The inhabitants of the islands, first utilizing copper, are now referred to as the sub-Ozieri culture, followed by the Filigosa and Abialtsu phases, and then the Monte Claro culture. The megalithic tradition continued, albeit with some changes we will discuss in a moment. The necropoli in Sardinia are made up of varying numbers of domus janas. Some of these contain singular tombs, whereas others have groups of as many as 40. Many are dug into the ground and consist of an entrance shaft, a gently sloping corridor called a domus, and an antechamber with smaller rooms branching off from it. Sometimes there's also a large hall connected to the antechamber. When motifs are present, they are usually in these two chambers, so it's thought they were for funerary rituals and that the smaller rooms were for the actual burials. In this photograph of a domus janus at the necropolis of Su Crucifissu Manu near Porto Torres, you can see the antechamber with the tombs branching off from it and the dromos leading into the antechamber in the background. The roof has collapsed at some point, which is why it's open to the air. However, some necropoli were excavated from the slopes of valleys rather than being dug into the ground, such as the necropolis of Gena Salixi near Villa San Antonio. I visited both of these sites, and what I found interesting about the necropolis of Su Crucifissu Manu were the cart ruts. Watch my video on that if you haven't already, as well as its proximity to the Ziggurat style platform of Monte, which I've also done a video on. Several domus janus were carved into this erratic boulder near Castel Sardo called the Elephant Rock because of its appearance. So that's another example where the ancients chose not to dig down into the ground to create their tombs. They were good at spotting geological formations that were easier to work. A strange feature of the domus janus is that they are often carved with double-pitched roofs, central beams, joists, cornices, and false doors. Archaeologists think these were meant to imitate above-ground dwellings or religious buildings since they serve no structural function in the tombs themselves. However, little is known about the open-air hut villages inhabited by the Ozieri culture since they were made almost entirely of perishable material. Sometimes stone foundations were used, but few of these have been found. Archaeologists know the shape of the huts from shallow pits marked in the soil, and they are also fairly sure they were made of wooden walls and straw roofs. But other than that, their appearance isn't known with any certainty. Here is an example of a false door with roof carvings and a floor hearth at the necropolis of Metsu e Montes, which was dug out of a limestone ridge on the slopes of Mount Mamas near the town of Ossi. It's made up of 18 domus janus, all with multiple burial chambers in them. Hearths are pretty common. These are usually circular pits, sometimes with concentric circles carved around them. They are thought to have been used for rituals or to symbolize an ever-burning fire. This photograph of the necropolis of Noadale shows a double-pitched roof with a central beam. Incidentally, I noticed that the Etruscan necropolis of Bandataccia near Rome also has tombs with carved roof beams, and they are also thought by experts to have imitated above-ground dwellings. However, the Etruscan necropolis was built from the 8th century BCE onwards, so much later than the Neolithic domus of Janus in Sardinia. Decorative motifs in the necropolis of Metsu e Montes include horns, hourglasses, chevrons, and wolves' teeth. In fact, several hundred of the thousands of tombs are decorated in some way, either with sculptures, engravings, or paintings. It's not clear why they aren't all decorated, though. The most common motif is that of a bucranium. Here's a fine example from Elephant Rock. Experts think that the bull horns represented the male procreative power, whereas the mother goddess figurines indicated female fertility. Interestingly, mother goddess figurines have also been found inside the Domus de Janus during excavations. Before I went to the necropolis of Su Crucifixu Manu, I read that it had an example of a horn carving, but I couldn't find it. There are many tombs there, and I stuck to exploring the collapsed open-air tombs since I didn't think it was too safe to clamber around all of them by myself. The place was completely empty apart from me. But here's a photograph I found of the horns. Other motifs in Domus de Janus include chevrons, zigzags, schematic anthropomorphic figures, spirals, and checkerboards. This photograph by Donna Neuralgica shows the checkerboard and wave patterns painted in red ochre at the necropolis of Bubu Satile. Donna Neuralgica gave me permission to feature her work here. Links to her website and social media pages are in the description below. Interestingly, a checkerboard pattern and spirals are also found decorating the House Afflieni Hypogea in Malta, an underground Neolithic sanctuary that appears to have had a dual purpose as a place of ritual and a burial site. There are over 200 dolmens in Sardinia. The style of these evolved over time from a large horizontal slab resting on several uprights to corridor dolmens. It's thought these were the precursors to the giants' graves, which emerged during the Bronze Age under the Neolithic civilization. So once again, they are related to funerary architecture. But what's strange is the Domus de Janus and dolmens were contemporary with one another. So why were two different types of funerary architecture needed? I read that dolmens tended to replace Domus de Janus, but new necropoli continued to be dug out right into the Copper Age, so that doesn't make sense. Also, why are there hundreds of dolmens but thousands of Domus de Janus? Menhirs, known locally as perdas fitas, are widespread in Sardinia and are found in various styles and heights. There are more than 700 menhirs, mostly plain in design. I visited the Menhir di Monte Curotundu near Villa San Antonio. This is thought to have been built by the Ozieri culture in the earliest megalith building period on the island. Standing at 6 meters high, this is one of the tallest, but would have been even taller when the small stone next to it formed its tip. Many menhirs are alone, but could be said to form some sort of alignment with others in the area. For example, there are 2 other menhirs within a couple of kilometers of the Menhir di Monte Curotundu I just showed you. Then there are others which form obvious groupings, such as the stone rose at Buru e Concus and the group at Pranumutedu. There are around 200 menhirs at Buru e Concus, which is reminiscent of the famous Karnak alignments in France, albeit on a smaller scale. Pranumutedu has around 60 menhirs grouped together. Although many menhirs are plain, some have cup marks on them similar to rock art found in Scotland and other places with megalithic structures. The Menhir di Monte Curotundu apparently has these cup marks, but I couldn't see them and they don't show up in any photographs. It could be they're just highly eroded. The Stela of Boeli at Mamoiada is decorated with spirals, also common motifs in the rest of the ancient world. The Filigosa culture introduced statue-menhirs to the island. These tend to be smaller than the previous menhirs, but are decorated with carvings which are proto-anthropomorphic or anthropomorphic. The most common motif carved in low relief on them is a dagger. In the Copper Age, the Monte culture started building their villages on high lands surrounded by huge megalithic walls. Experts think that defense had become an important consideration by that time. I didn't visit any of these, but I did find some photographs in books and online. And what I noticed is that these walls are polygonal or cyclopean. And if you see my videos on such masonry found in abundance on the Italian mainland, you will know there's a whole other mystery there. Here's an example from Monte near Olmedo. Megalithic stone circles with menhirs were also built by the Monte culture. Here's a photograph of the Safigu stone circle near Itiri. Starting with the Ozieri culture, the mystifying site of Monte went through several phases of remodeling, right up to and including the Copper Age. I call it mystifying because the main structure at the site is the only one of its kind in Sardinia and is obviously reminiscent of a ziggurat-style step pyramid. This platform started off as a 24 by 27 meter, roughly square structure with a temple on top painted in red ochre, which was accessed by a 25-meter long ramp. The ramp points in a south-southwesterly direction. In the Copper Age, following a fire, the structure was enlarged to 35 by 31 meters, and a second platform was added encasing what was left of the original temple. The ramp was then extended to 40 meters. Aside from the platform, other features at the site include a dolmen, a menhir, and 2 spheroidal stones. The dolmen-style structure, also referred to as an altar slab, is located on the right of the ramp and may have been a sacrificial altar or a table for ceremonial meals. On the left side of the ramp, there's a 4.5 meter high menhir with a squarish profile. There are other menhirs in the surrounding fields which must have also been connected with the site too. These don't seem accessible, they're on private land, but I've read about them. 2 spheroidal stones were found nearby and moved to the right-hand side of the ramp. One is full of shallow depressions and a deep carving, the other is undecorated. It's not certain what these stones were meant to be, but it's thought the large one represents an omphalos, or the centre of the earth. Monte was also the site of multiple hut villages, each replacing a previous one. Some stone foundations of the most recent huts remain. So it's quite clear that Sardinia has some of the earliest megaliths and ornate underground burial complexes in the central Mediterranean, and that this building culture continued for around 1,500 years. They built menhirs, dolmens, stone circles, megalithic walls, necropoli, and a ziggurat for some strange reason. Their art included spirals, horns, checkerboards, geometric patterns, and mother goddess figurines. In many ways, their culture was unique, and in others, it was reminiscent of other megalith building communities springing up all over Europe at the time. My research has helped me to come up with some theories on these ancient people, but at the moment, my main questions still remain. How was the megalith building culture in Sardinia connected to the others? What was the function of the non-funerary architecture? And what's the real meaning behind all those motifs? I just don't go in for this fertile bull combined with fertile goddess angle. I think there's more to it, especially since motifs were only used in around 10% of the necropoli. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Some of you have not hit the notification bell, so do it now. Do it so you know when a premiere is coming and you can get involved in the chat. I'm always there in the premiere chat to answer your questions, apart from that one time I got stuck in traffic. My channel now has lots of videos on the Neolithic as well as other time periods that may teach us something about those crazy megalith builders. I'm also on Patreon. Thank you, patrons. Come and find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where I post regularly, including photographs from the sites I visit. My website, megalithhunter.com, has further information on these places too.